Golden light from hundreds of crystal chandeliers poured over the grand hall, shimmering like an ocean of radiance woven from money. Classical music filled the air, blending with the clink of crystal glasses and the carefully measured laughter of the elite. On stage, a middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped forward amid roaring applause. His face betrayed no emotion. His eyes were cold, calculating. Every gesture was deliberate. That man was James Jones, the billionaire hailed as the man who held the city's fate, the living emblem of power and control. He held the microphone, his voice slow but resonant. "Success," he said, "is not luck. It is discipline, belief, and the strength to never fall." The audience broke into synchronized applause, echoing off the tall glass walls like waves. Here, the lights never dimmed, and smiles were measured in stock value. At the far end of the hall, the line of servers stood in perfect formation, black and white uniforms, polished shoes gleaming under the chandeliers. Among them, a small figure stood out, a little black girl, no more than 6 years old, wearing a slightly oversized waiter's shirt with the sleeves rolled up, her canvas shoes plain and worn. Her hair was tied back with a faded ribbon, and in her dark, luminous eyes burned something unusual: stillness, clarity, defiance. Her name was Alan. No one paid her any attention. To them, she was just someone's kid from the kitchen staff, or a child brought along to help clear tables for fun. But Alan didn't stare at the floor like the others. She stood straight, eyes fixed on the stage where James raised his glass. That look wasn't curiosity. It wasn't fear. It was the quiet gaze of someone seeing what adults refuse to see. James lifted his glass of wine high. Under the chandeliers, the dark red liquid shimmered like blood in crystal. He twisted his wrist slightly, that familiar rehearsed smile spreading, the kind honed for cameras and admiration. "A toast," he declared, "to faith, and to those who dare to believe in the future." Glasses clinked like rainfall. The hall rejoiced. At the end of the room, Alan did not clap. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing on the neck of the wine bottle. There, a faint green line, thin as thread, running down the glass. Under the golden light, it glowed oddly. Her brow furrowed. A chill crawled down her spine. She could hear her heartbeat pounding beneath the violin's delicate tremor. James brought the glass to his lips. Beside him, Jessica, a blonde woman in a satin blue gown, laughed brightly. At the nearby table, Hawkins, the tall waiter, avoided Alan's gaze, his hand trembling slightly on the tray. Alan watched them all, a child watching actors in a play where she alone knew the script was wrong. The wine rippled. A single drop slipped over the rim, sliding down James's finger. Under the chandeliers, it glowed red, like blood. And in that instant, Alan knew something was about to happen. She took a deep breath. Her small hands tightened around the silver tray. The soles of her canvas shoes pressed softly against the marble floor. No one knew that on this glittering night, it would be this 6-year-old girl, small, dark-skinned, unnoticed, who would bring down the entire confidence of an empire. And it would all begin with that unflinching look in her eyes. The violin still played softly, its melody spreading through the hall like a thin silk curtain, hiding every human flaw beneath its sheen. James raised his glass. His lips had just brushed the rim of the crystal when a small voice rang out from the far end of the hall, steady, unshaken, yet sharp enough to slice through the swelling music. "Don't drink it, sir." The sound was clear, quiet, but firm. Everything stopped. The violin froze mid-note, the player's fingers stiff on the strings, the last tone fading like a breath cut short. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the source of the voice. A child. Alan stood there, the silver tray in her hands slightly tilted, the golden light catching in her deep black eyes like pools of dark oil. She took a deep breath and spoke again, slow and clear. "Don't drink it. That glass isn't right." The room seemed to harden. A wave of whispers rippled through the air, spreading fast as wind. Jessica froze, her smiling face stiffening. "What's going on?" she whispered, eyes darting toward the little girl. James looked from his glass to the child. He gave a thin, polite smile, the kind worn smooth by habit, weary but controlled. "What did she say?" he asked Hawkins. Hawkins bowed slightly, fumbling for words. "Sir, she's just a helper. New. Maybe she misunderstood something." Alan didn't bow. She stepped forward once, her voice stronger now. "It's not a misunderstanding. The wine in that glass isn't like the others. It smells different." A few guests chuckled. A man wearing a trade council pin called out, "Well, perhaps the young lady wants to teach Mr. Jones how to drink wine." Laughter spread, light, patronizing. But James didn't laugh. His eyes narrowed. "Different how? What smell?" Alan answered without hesitation. "Metal, like copper. Wine never smells like that." That stopped a few smiles. Silence hovered, short, brittle. Jessica placed a hand on James's arm, murmuring, "James, let it go. She's just a child." James kept his gaze on Alan. His expression shifted. Not annoyance, but a flicker of curiosity. He turned to Hawkins. "Who prepared this bottle?" Hawkins replied quickly, "I did, sir. Same as always." Alan cut in. "Not the same. The label's different. This one has a thin green mark." Everyone turned toward the wine table. Indeed, the bottle Hawkins had brought bore a faint green line running down its neck, only visible when the light hit it at a certain angle. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Jessica pressed her lips together, her tone sharp. "That's enough. Don't let a child ruin the evening." But Alan didn't move. Her voice dropped, low, calm, chilling. "If you drink it, you won't live past morning." The words were so cold they silenced the entire string section. All eyes turned to James. He slowly set the glass down. His expression had changed. No smile, no chill, only calculation. "Call the medical team," he said quietly. Security staff moved at once. "Take that bottle for testing," James ordered. Jessica gasped. "You'd suspect your own staff? Because of a child's word?" James didn't answer. He looked at Alan. "What's your name?" "Alan." "How did you know the smell was wrong?" "It smelled like blood." The reply hit the air, dry, unblinking, unwavering. A chill swept across the hall. Someone swallowed audibly. A technician carefully opened the bottle, adding a few drops of test solution. Seconds passed. The liquid turned cloudy gray, then black. Silence. Only the sound of someone's heartbeat, amplified faintly through the microphone. The technician looked up at James, his voice trembling. "Sir, it's poisoned." Jessica went pale. Hawkins bowed his head. Mark stepped forward, shielding James instinctively. Alan remained still, tray in hand, saying nothing. In that moment, the violin was silent. Every laugh, every toast, every congratulatory cheer, gone. A 6-year-old girl had just saved a billionaire's life before hundreds of witnesses. And no one yet knew that her act had only just triggered the storm to come. The banquet hall fell into a heavy silence. The music was gone. Only the faint shuffle of shoes and a few frightened whispers remained. Faces that had been smiling moments ago were now frozen, pale, drained of color. Every eye turned toward the wine glass, where a few drops of dark, murky liquid still spread across the white tablecloth. James stood motionless, his hand still gripping the stem of the glass as if he needed the physical proof that he had just escaped death. His gaze swept across the room, from old friends and business partners to the servers pressed flat against the walls. No one dared to meet his eyes. Jessica took a step back, her voice breaking. "This can't be. What is happening?" Hawkins dropped to his knees, hands trembling violently. "Sir, I swear I knew nothing about this. I did exactly what I always do." Mark gestured for security to seize all remaining bottles. Within minutes, the once radiant banquet tables looked cold, disordered, littered with confiscated glasses and wary glances. James exhaled slowly, then spoke in a low, even voice that carried through the silence. "No one leaves this room until I know who did this." The tone wasn't loud, but it sent a shiver through everyone present. Jessica tried to steady herself, stepping closer. "James, you can't suspect everyone because of what a child said. She could be mistaken." Alan interrupted, her voice clear and unwavering. I'm not mistaken. Every head turned again. She stood perfectly still, her small hands gripping the silver tray, her voice calm and firm. I saw someone switch the bottle, and I saw that person look around, like they were afraid of being caught. James's brow tightened. Who was it? Who was it? Alan was silent. 1 second. 2. Then, she turned her eyes, slowly, toward Hawkins, still kneeling on the floor. The room gasped. Hawkins looked up, eyes wide. No, not me. She's lying. I just did my job. Mark signaled, and 2 guards stepped forward to restrain him. Jessica snapped, her tone sharp. What are you doing, Mark? You're arresting a man on a child's word? Mark's reply was short, controlled. I'm following Mr. Jones's orders. James said nothing. He only looked at Alan, not with suspicion, but with something between belief and debt. Alan stepped back, her eyes luminous beneath the golden light. I don't want anyone arrested. I just don't want you to die. The words froze the entire room. Jessica covered her mouth, and for the first time in years, James lowered his eyes. His voice, when it came, trembled faintly. What did you just say? Alan spoke slowly. I said, if someone can poison you in a room full of people, it means they're not afraid of anyone. A chill spread through the hall. That simple, innocent sentence carried a truth the adults were too afraid to voice. James turned to Mark, his tone hoarse. Lock every exit, start checking everyone. Alan bowed slightly and stepped back into the line of servers. No one noticed, but in her eyes, the crystal lights above had blurred into pale, trembling dots. No one knew that within hours, this very child, the one who had just saved a billionaire from death, would become the one the whole world would suspect. The sound of the ballroom doors closing echoed sharply, a dry, final note that felt like an unspoken declaration. The party was over. No more music, no more laughter. Only the cold white light from above, slicing through the room like blades. The security team stood in 2 lines, blocking every exit. No one was allowed to leave. James Jones sat at the central table, back straight, his gaze so cold it froze the room into stillness. Before him, the poisoned glass still sat untouched, the murky black liquid inside like a stain that could never be washed away. Mark approached quietly. Sir, we've rechecked the service roster. Hawkins was responsible for bringing out the wine, but the delivery entry for tonight was signed off by someone else. James's brows drew together. Who? Mark handed him the signed form. Jessica. The air shattered like cracking glass. Every head turned toward the woman in the blue satin gown. Jessica froze, her face drained of color. What are you saying? I only signed it because the logistics team asked. They were short on staff. I just helped them out. James said nothing. He looked at her for a long, deliberate moment. Signed it for them? She nodded quickly, voice faltering. Yes. You don't really think I... He placed the paper on the table, his voice dropping into something quiet but heavy. I don't think anything. I just ask. From the side of the hall, Alan watched silently. The air in the room had thickened, ready to burst. The adults were turning on one another with their eyes, each trying to distance themselves from danger. But James remained still, not angry, not panicked. It was his silence that frightened them most. He turned to Hawkins, his tone measured. You say you knew nothing about the bottle. I believe you. Until I find a reason not to. Hawkins bowed his head, fists clenched, sweat forming along his brow. Sir, I've worked for you 10 years. I've never... Yes, James cut in. And that's why I want to know. Who had access to my wine cellar? No one answered. The air was so thick you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then a small voice came from the back of the room. Maybe it was him. Everyone turned. Alan stood there, hands clasped in front of her chest, voice soft as breath, yet enough to freeze the entire room. He looked away from me when the bottle was brought out. Hawkins's eyes widened, furious. She's lying. I didn't do anything. I was just doing my job. James studied the girl, surprise flickering behind the frost. Are you sure, Alan? She nodded. I'm not sure who did it, but I'm sure he's afraid. The words hit like a stone dropped in still water. Jessica clenched her hands, voice trembling. God, James, you can't believe a 6-year-old child over your most loyal employee. He turned to her, his gaze like a blade. I don't believe anyone, I observe. The words fell. Cold. Absolute. Mark nodded, signaling security. 2 guards escorted Hawkins toward a side room for questioning. The tall man resisted, muttering his innocence until the door shut behind him. Silence returned. James exhaled slowly, then turned toward the little girl standing at the edge of the hall. Alan, come here. She walked forward, unhurried, eyes steady and fearless. Do you know what you've just done? He asked, his voice low, like distant thunder. I told the truth, she said. And if you're wrong? Then I'll apologize. But if I'm right, you wouldn't be alive. The answer made James pause, a long, quiet beat. Then he nodded slightly, his eyes softening just a fraction. Good. From now on, you stay here. I need to know what's really happening. From the far corner, Jessica watched, lips pressed tightly together. No one noticed the fleeting expression that crossed her face, not fear, but unease. The air in the ballroom grew heavier by the minute. The chandelier lights no longer gleamed, they merely exposed every anxious face below. The mingled scents of perfume, wine, and fear formed a sharp, suffocating taste in the air. The powerful guests, people used to controlling markets with a word, now fidgeted, whispering, watching one another with growing suspicion. James remained seated at the central table, eyes fixed on nothing. Every voice, every movement seemed to fade away until only one sound remained, the slow, heavy beat of his own heart. Someone had just tried to kill him, here, in the most luxurious room, on the grandest night. That meant one thing. The attempt wasn't just murder, it was a message. Jessica stepped closer, forcing her voice steady. James, you need to get out of here. You're exhausted. Let Mark handle the rest. He turned to her, his voice rough. If I walk out of this room, rumors will spread within 10 minutes. The press will call it an internal coup. Stocks will crash, and those waiting for me to fall will celebrate. You're talking about image when you just nearly died? She shot back, her voice trembling. James looked at her for a long time, then spoke quietly, almost a whisper. In this world, Jessica, image can be worth more than life. Mark approached, setting a report on the table. Mr. Jones, we've conducted a preliminary interrogation. Hawkins still insists he's innocent, but a warehouse worker confirmed seeing him enter the storage area at 4 p.m. after it was locked. James frowned. Footage? Corrupted, sir. All recordings from 3 to 5 p.m. were erased. A soft sigh escaped someone in the crowd. A guest shook his head, murmuring, That's not the work of a low-level employee, that's someone inside the system. Jessica gripped James's sleeve. Do you hear that? This isn't for you to solve alone. You can't sit here like a judge. They need to see you composed. Composed? James gave a quiet, bitter laugh. When I just almost drank poison from my own glass? She said nothing, but there was something else in her eyes. Not fear, something closer to guilt or conflict. Across the room, Alan stood apart from the chaos. The little girl watched everything, wide-eyed, unblinking. In all the confusion, she remained still, a small island of calm in a storm. A female server passed by and whispered, That child's strange. No tears, no fear. It's like she knew this would happen. James heard it. He turned his head toward the girl. Are you afraid? Alan shook her head. No. But I see that you are. The words stopped him cold. For a moment, every sound vanished. Only that pure, steady voice lingered, so honest it stung. He pushed against the table and rose to his feet. I'm not afraid, he said slowly. I'm angry. Mark signaled the technical team to continue scanning, while guards held their positions. Then, a scream erupted from the hallway. Everyone turned, faces blanched. A security officer burst in, panting. Mr. Jones, the west storage door is open. Someone wiped the fingerprints. Mark met James's eyes, tension sharp in his voice. There's someone still inside, sir. The suspect hasn't left the building. Jessica went pale. You see? You have to leave now. This isn't about your reputation anymore. James looked straight at her. If I leave, who stays? She fell silent, lowering her head. He turned to Mark. Lock down the entire building. Block all incoming and outgoing signals. Anyone not on my list, detain them. Mark nodded and ran out. That left only James, Jessica, and Alan. 3 people, 3 worlds, standing in a hall stripped of its former grandeur. James spoke softly, as if to himself. There are no innocents in this game, only those who hide better. Alan lifted her head. If you trust no one, who will trust you? James turned to her but said nothing. Something in his eyes cracked, not fear, not fury, but a hollow space that power could never fill. The warehouse door slammed shut somewhere in the distance, and the entire room seemed to tremble. The chandelier lights flickered, then steadied again, revealing faces drawn tight with fear, eyes fixed on James. No one spoke, but the same thought rippled through every mind. The nightmare had only just begun. James stood at the center of the hall, both hands braced on the table, his back slightly bent as if carrying an invisible weight. The cold golden light cut across his face, outlining features that were both proud and exhausted. Years of ruling an empire had taught him how to command, how to be obeyed. But tonight, for the first time, he felt utterly powerless. Jessica stood a few steps away, clutching her glass of water, her voice trembling. James, you can't keep everyone locked inside. People will say you've lost control. He turned to her, holding her gaze. Maybe I have lost control, but at least I'm still alive to lose it. The room fell silent again. He looked around, voice lower now, steady but heavy. Someone wants me dead, and I won't leave this room until I know who. Mark re-entered, slightly out of breath. Sir, the inspection team just found something. The internal camera system's access codes were changed at 6 p.m. The one who changed them had top-level clearance. James narrowed his eyes. Meaning who? Mark's answer came slowly. Only 4 people have that clearance. You, me, Hawkins, and Jessica. It was instinctive. The entire room turned toward the woman in the blue satin gown. Jessica stepped back, her lips trembling. You can't believe I would do that. James, you know me. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, eyes both cold and sorrowful. I know you're capable of anything when you feel betrayed. Jessica's face went white. You're accusing me? James didn't reply. He turned to Mark instead. Recover the previous footage. I want to see everything. Mark nodded and left quickly. The air thickened again, dense, heavy, ready to snap. The remaining guests sat motionless, hardly daring to breathe. In the corner, Alan watched silently. She didn't understand all the words, but she could feel the truth. These people weren't just afraid of the poison. They were afraid of the light that would reveal it. A soft draft slipped through the doorframe, stirring the red velvet curtains. That faint sound echoed through the stillness, like the uneven beat of a heart. James leaned on the table, eyes fixed on the poisoned glass. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. Whoever wanted me dead didn't want me to die quickly. They wanted me to doubt everyone, to make me destroy my own empire. Alan took a step forward, her voice calm but carrying. If that's true, then that person must be very happy right now. James looked up at her. For a moment, the eyes of a billionaire and the gaze of a child met 2 opposite worlds sharing the same realization. The hidden enemy was among them, and suspicion itself was the sharpest weapon. Outside, the first roll of thunder sounded, announcing an approaching storm. The lights flickered. Everyone looked up, just as the security monitors along the wall blinked to life, playing automatically. The footage was grainy, distorted, but clear enough to see someone walking through the corridor at 6:12 p.m. Tall frame, broad shoulders, calm, deliberate steps. James squinted, murmuring, That's Hawkins. Alan tilted her head slightly, voice cool and certain. No, that person's wearing polished shoes. He wears canvas. The room fell silent once more. Every face turned toward the 6-year-old girl, half in fear, half in disbelief. And for the first time in his life, James Jones realized truth could take the form of a child. The image on the screen wavered, then steadied. Under the dim light, a figure in the frame walked slowly toward the wine cellar. He stopped, looked around, then bent down and did something very quick. You couldn't see his face, only a gloved hand holding a small knife, prying open the seal. After that, he replaced a bottle in the crate, put the old label back, and closed it neatly. The room was dead silent. Everyone's breath seemed to merge into a thick, held thing. James stared at the screen, his eyes cutting through the glare as if he could pull the man out of the shadows. "Zoom in," he said quietly. Mark obeyed. The frame blurred from low resolution, but one detail hit everyone. Across the wrist of that person was a long, thin scar in the shape of an X. Jessica went pale. "My God!" James turned to her. "You know that scar?" She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "That's Hawkins. He was burned by acid years ago. I remember it clearly." Mark stood behind them, voice low but clear. "So it was him." James gave a short nod. "Fine, bring him in. I want to hear it from his own mouth." A few minutes later, the door opened. Hawkins was led in by 2 guards, his collar rumpled, his face drained of color. He didn't look anyone in the eye. He kept his head down, hands trembling. James showed no anger, no shout. He only looked straight at him and spoke in a low, weary voice full of authority. "I've watched the tape. What do you have to say?" Hawkins looked up, eyes desperate. "I didn't do it, sir. I was set up. I don't know why I'm in that footage." Jessica stepped forward, sharp. "What are you saying? Everyone can clearly see your scar." "No, I swear to God, I never touched that bottle. Someone's trying to pin this on me." Alan moved forward, her voice small but firm. "If you were framed, do you know who would be close enough to do that?" Hawkins stared at the little girl, panic in his eyes, then fell silent. 1 second, 2. Then he whispered, "Someone who knew the cellar code and knew my shift times." James inclined his head, his tone steely. "Name." Hawkins swallowed. "Jessica." The sound dropped like shattering glass. The room exploded into murmurs and fear, then fell abruptly quiet. Jessica stepped back, voice breaking. "Are you insane? How dare you accuse me?" Hawkins shouted, tears running down his face. "I'm not accusing. She gave me the spare key 2 days ago, said it was to check stock." "That's enough," James barked, his voice echoing through the hall. Everyone fell silent. He stood and took a step toward Jessica. "Is this true?" Jessica trembled, backing away. I only did it because you asked. You told me to hand over cellar access to Hawkins during the gala because you trusted him." James stared at her a long time. "I never said that." A shiver ran through Jessica. She turned away as if remembering something. Mark cut in, his voice rough. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to test the remaining sample." James nodded. A technician brought another bottle, poured a few drops onto a test strip. The color shifted from red to gray, then to black. But this time the technician frowned. "This isn't an ordinary poison," he said. "It's a compound that slowly paralyzes the heart muscle. Low doses cause fatigue, high doses are fatal, a few hours after ingestion." James went cold. "How long until it takes effect?" "About 4 hours after drinking." All eyes fixed on the poisoned glass on the table. A deathly silence settled. Then Jessica blurted out, voice breaking. "If you tasted it before I arrived, then you—" James looked at her. A drop of wine still clung to his wrist where it had soaked the skin. He smiled, very faintly. "Perhaps we do not have much time left to find out who wanted me dead." Alan watched him, her dark eyes flickering, but her voice remained calm. "If you are dying, at least you should know who chose this moment." James turned back, his gaze sharpening like a blade glinting in the night. "Why, Alan?" "Because," she replied, "that person didn't only want you dead, they wanted you to see the people you trust betray you." A strong gust rattled the curtains. Outside, thunder rolled once more. In the corner, a security light blinked and then went out completely. In the flicker of failing lights, the entire hall plunged into a cold, breathless darkness. The sound of hurried breathing filled the air, the scrape of shoes against marble, the faint clink of metal somewhere in the dark, and for a few seconds, no one dared to move. Then the light snapped back on, brighter, whiter, and far more merciless than before. James Jones still stood at the center of the room. He didn't panic. He didn't speak. He only stared at the faint red stain dried on his wrist, the wine drop, darkened now, a reminder that death was already inside him, waiting. Jessica stood a few steps away, her face as pale as porcelain. "James, you have to go to the hospital. Stop pretending you're fine." He turned toward her, eyes so cold they made her step back. "If I walk out of this room, everything collapses. Not just this gala. The entire company. Whoever wants me dead will believe they've already won." "You're talking about reputation while you could die any second," she cried, her voice breaking. James's reply was quiet, but cuttingly clear. "Reputation is the only thing left when a man dies." The room fell silent again. Mark glanced at him and said softly, "Sir, the medical team is preparing an emergency room inside the building. We can run immediate tests." "No need." James raised a hand. "We end this before I fall." Every eye turned toward him. Alan stood where she had always been, small, still, her hands gripping the edge of her dress. She looked at James and spoke, her voice soft but carrying clean through the heavy air. "If you want to end this, you have to let the one who's afraid tell the truth." James bent down slightly, a faint smile curling his lips. "And you think you know who that is?" "The one who's most afraid." Her answer froze him for a moment. He swept his gaze across the room. Everyone avoided his eyes, each person rehearsing innocence. "Mark," he said, his tone dropping low, "check the list of all staff on duty tonight. Who arrived first? Who left their post early?" Mark nodded, pulling out his tablet. But as soon as he opened the file, the screen flickered. Then a red warning flashed across it. "Access denied." "Impossible," Mark muttered. "The system's been locked. Someone just cut admin access." Whispers swelled like a wave. Jessica went pale. "It can't be Hawkins. He's detained. Then who?" Suddenly, the chandeliers went out again. A heartbeat of total silence. Then the shriek of metal from the main doors. Someone screamed. A shadow bolted across the service aisle. Mark drew his weapon, shouting, "Stop." Chaos erupted, chairs crashing, glass shattering, footsteps pounding on marble, then the sharp clash of metal and a cry of pain. When the lights came back, the room froze. A technician lay sprawled on the floor, clutching a half-severed cable. Blood spread from his shoulder, not fatal, but shocking enough. Pinned to his collar was a silver ID badge, Security System Administrator. James stepped forward, his voice glacial. "Name?" Daniel Lee," the man gasped. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years. "And who told you to do this?" Daniel trembled, lips quivering. I don't know. They sent a message, said if I didn't, my family wouldn't be safe." James clenched his jaw. "Who are they? How are being?" "I don't know. They only signed as A." The word dropped like a gunshot. Jessica staggered back, her pulse racing. You mean someone inside the company?" Mark spoke quietly. "No. A is an internal code, top-level clearance. Only the founder ever used it." James closed his eyes, his breath heavy. "The founder's been dead for over 10 years. Alan lifted her head, her small voice carrying farther than seemed possible. "Not the one who died, the one who inherited." Everyone turned toward the child. Alan didn't flinch. "Someone's using the name of the past to kill you, Mr. Jones, and that person might be sitting in this very room." Jessica took another step back, her eyes wild. "What is she talking about? Who is she talking about?" James said nothing. He didn't need to. Faces flashed through his mind. Friends, allies, lovers, rivals. Each one could be the hand holding the knife. Outside, rain began to fall. Heavy, deliberate drops tapping against the glass, mingling with the low roll of thunder. No one in the room moved. James slowly raised his head, meeting Alan's gaze. "If you're right, then someone's been ahead of us for a long time." Alan nodded slightly. "And they know you don't trust anyone." A crack of thunder split the sky. The light flared for a single heartbeat, reflected in the eyes of the 6-year-old girl. Eyes calm to the point of terror, as if she had already seen how it would all end. Long before it ever began, thunder cracked outside, long, drawn out, like the furious exhale of the sky itself. Rain lashed against the glass, each strike a heavy drumbeat that merged with the ragged breathing inside the silent hall. No one moved, not a soul dared. It was as if the slightest shift might cause the entire fragile truth to collapse. James stood still, his fist clenched so tightly the veins on his knuckles bulged. On his wrist, the faint stain of wine had darkened, the skin beneath it now tinged gray. He stared at it for a long time, feeling a faint itching crawl outward. Inside his body, something was stirring, slow, deliberate, patient, waiting for the moment to strike. Jessica saw the way he swayed and rushed to him, her voice breaking. "You're not well, James. Let the doctors check you. Please." He brushed her hand aside, his gaze distant. He was right. Someone used Code A. That code can't be touched, except by family. Mark stepped forward quietly. "Sir, are you suggesting your mother?" The air froze. Every remaining pair of eyes turned toward James. He closed his eyes for a moment, a tired smile crossing his face. "She's been gone for over 20 years, but she always left doors open, doors only the fearless would dare to unlock." Alan said nothing. Her eyes, dark and steady, were fixed on his trembling hand. "You still have time," she said softly, "but not much." He turned to her, his gaze cold and deep. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen someone die from it before." A chill ran through the room. Her words were a knife, soft, but it sank deep. Jessica's voice wavered. What did you just say?" Alan didn't answer immediately. She took a step forward, slow, deliberate, her small face calm beneath the dim gold light. "It was my father. He worked for your company, and he trusted the wrong people, until the wine in his hand changed its scent." James went rigid. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, colliding with memory. "Your father's name?" "He was in charge of quality control for your pharmaceutical research division. His name was Marcus Lee." Silence swallowed the room. Mark's eyes widened. "Marcus Lee? He died in the chemical plant fire 10 years ago. That was ruled an accident." Alan nodded gently. "It wasn't an accident. It was a warning. And now, someone intends to finish what they started." James stared at her for a long time before speaking, his voice hoarse. "You're saying they won't stop until I'm dead?" Alan's reply came quiet, steady, colder than the rain outside. "No, they'll stop when you admit you were never innocent." The sentence landed like a silent explosion. Jessica stumbled back. Mark froze. James stood motionless, a flash of realization crossing his face. Not fear, but the shock of understanding. A missing piece had just clicked into place. He turned toward the darkened monitor. In the flickering light, his own reflection stared back, pale, unfamiliar, the face of a man he no longer recognized. Outside, the rain fell harder, relentless and cold. And in Alan's eyes, those deep, dark eyes that never looked away, a faint light flickered, as if she had known the ending all along, and was only waiting for him to understand it, before it was too late. Rain hammered against the glass roof like 1,000 hands tapping out the rhythm of a verdict yet to be read. No one spoke, no one moved. The grand hall, once glowing in golden light, now felt like a laboratory, cold, sterile, stripped of life. Every laugh, every clink of glass, every trace of music had vanished. Only the sound of hearts beating and uneven breaths remained. James Jones stood at the center, shoulders squared but eyes heavy. He looked around, at faces once familiar, once smiling, once bowing to him, now lowered, refusing to meet his gaze. The silence was no longer courtesy. It was fear. Mark approached, his voice low but urgent. "Sir, security has swept the entire floor. No sign of intrusion. Someone locked all exits from the inside." James nodded slightly, his gaze pausing on the red velvet curtain swaying under the hum of the air vents. "Locked?" he murmured. "Good. From now on, no one leaves." Jessica spun around, panic in her voice. "James, you can't do that. This may be your building, but these people are not your prisoners." "And yet I was nearly killed in my own building," he said, voice flat, expression unreadable. "If I'm the target, what makes you think the killer isn't still here?" Mark gave a tight nod and signaled the guards. Electronic locks snapped shut one after another, sharp, metallic, echoing through the hall. Several guests began to murmur, voices trembling. "He's lost it." "We're just guests, not suspects." James turned, scanning the crowd with an expression that silenced them all. "Anyone who wishes to leave may try, but remember this. If the one behind this had the nerve to strike under the brightest lights, imagine what he could do in the dark." No one moved. Only thunder answered him, rolling through the sky, rain pounding harder. Jessica crossed her arms, shaking her head. "You're turning this night into a prison, James. You're threatening the very people who came to support you." His tone was calm, deliberate. "No, I'm teaching them who to be afraid of." From the far corner, Alan stood silently, her small hands clutching her apron. Her eyes drifted over the crowd, calm, analytical, unblinking. She didn't understand power, but she understood people. And she could tell that among the trembling faces, at least one wasn't truly afraid, just waiting. Mark stepped closer, voice cautious. "Sir, if you're right, then the killer is trapped with us. But if you're wrong..." James cut him off, his gaze sharp as forged steel. "Then at least we'll know who tries to escape first." A flash of lightning lit the hall, bleaching every face in stark white. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Then the darkness returned. Thicker, colder, alive with tension. Jessica's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Are you trying to find the killer, or yourself?" James didn't answer. He only turned his wrist, staring at the dry, dark stain on his skin. Then he spoke, quiet, steady, final. "Lock every floor. No one leaves until I know why I'm still alive." The words struck the marble like a blade driven into stone. A few people gasped. Alan lifted her head, eyes unblinking, deep, dark, endless. Outside, thunder tore the sky in two. Inside, the final lock clicked shut, sounding less like protection and more like the end of a world they thought they knew. The rain drummed against the glass roof like 1,000 hands delivering the rhythm of an unread sentence. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The ballroom, once drenched in golden light, now felt sterile, clinical. Every trace of music and laughter had vanished, leaving only the hum of fear. Mark returned after a few minutes, his face pale, a sealed, transparent envelope in his hands. The silence deepened. James gave a faint nod. Mark stepped forward, placing the envelope on the table. His voice was low, deliberate. "Sir, the fingerprint analysis on the second wine bottle is back." No one exhaled. Even the rain seemed to pause against the glass. James's eyes were sharp as blades. "Read it." Mark opened the envelope and unfolded the report. His voice rasped, each word ringing in the cold, metallic air. 2 sets of fingerprints were found. One belongs to Hawkins, confirmed against his employee record. The other belongs to someone else. Jessica gripped her glass, eyes fixed on him. "Who?" Mark hesitated a second before saying quietly, "Alan." The word dropped like a stone into still water, its echo rippling through every chest, colliding with the walls. The hall seemed to explode with silence. Alan lifted her head. She said nothing, didn't flinch. She stood straight, calm, so calm it made the others shiver. Jessica gasped, part relief, part horror. "That's impossible, a 6-year-old? How could that be?" James studied the girl for a long moment. "Alan," he said, voice low. "Did you ever touch that bottle?" "Yes," she answered evenly. "I was clearing the tables. I saw it out of place and put it back." "Before or after Hawkins?" She paused. "Before." A low murmur swept the room. Jessica turned on Mark, her tone rising. "You see? She had the chance. And who knows what she might have learned from her father, the one who used to work in your chemical division." Alan turned her head slowly toward Jessica. Her gaze silenced the woman mid-sentence. Deep, still, knowing, like she had heard that accusation 100 times before in her memory. "I didn't want him to die," Alan said quietly. "If I did, I would have stayed silent." James leaned back in his chair, fingertips brushing the rim of his empty glass, slowly turning it. "There's one thing I've learned, Alan. No one in this room does anything without a reason. So what's yours?" "My reason," she replied, "is because no one else dared to speak." Mark interjected softly. "Sir, I reviewed the footage. At 1742, there's clear video of her returning the bottle to its place. No suspicious movement." Jessica blinked, her expression shifting from accusation to confusion. "Then, why are her prints there?" Mark replied, "Possibly from cleaning, but—" He hesitated. "There's another anomaly. On the bottle's neck, there's a third partial print. Faint, incomplete. It doesn't match anyone in the guest or staff database." James narrowed his eyes. "Show me." Mark projected the image onto the screen. A blurry print appeared, only half visible, but distinct enough. The ridges formed a strange double spiral, unnatural, almost artificial. A guest whispered, "It looks fabricated, like someone tried to alter the pattern." Alan stepped closer, eyes fixed on the screen. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. "Not someone, something." The room went utterly still. James looked at her, his voice heavy. "What are you saying?" "That bottle wasn't touched by a human hand. It was held with a synthetic grip. That pattern, it's from a surface sensor, like those on a robotic arm." Mark frowned. "You mean the warehouse automation units?" Alan nodded. "If one was remote-controlled, someone could swap the bottle without ever entering the cellar." James leaned back slowly, his eyes darkening. "And only one person has access to that system." Mark's voice was low, certain. "Yes, the Chief of Technical Operations, Jessica." The air froze solid. Jessica stumbled back, eyes wide. "No, that's not true. I never touched the cellar. I only approved the operational logs." James's tone dropped to a whisper, calm, cold, absolute. "Exactly. That's why no one suspected you." Jessica clutched her chest, her breath breaking. "You think I'd kill you?" He met her eyes. "I think, if anyone could kill me and still look flawless doing it, it's you." A flash of lightning struck outside, illuminating the glass walls in blinding white. Its reflection glimmered in Alan's eyes. The small girl standing silently between them, watching not just a confrontation, but the unraveling of a world built on power, lies, and fear. And in that silence, her steady gaze seemed to hold the truth, that no adult in the room was brave enough to face. No one spoke another word. Outside, the rain kept pounding against the glass roof, steady, relentless, like the ticking countdown of an unseen clock. The air inside had thickened to something almost solid. Breathing hurt. The dim light reflected off pale faces, some trembling, some hiding, some pretending to be calm. Only one face failed to hide anything, Jessica's. She stood motionless, shoulders shaking, lips pressed tight. Before her, James remained still, his eyes cold as forged steel. There was no anger in them anymore. Only something deeper, disappointment and exhaustion. Jessica's voice came soft, hoarse. "You really believe I could kill you?" James didn't answer right away. He rolled the empty wine glass slowly between his fingers, watching the imaginary liquid swirl beneath the light. "Trust is the most fragile thing, Jessica. I've trusted too many people, and the price is always high." "But I'm not one of them," she cried, tears mixing with the rhythm of the rain. "I've stood beside you for 10 years. I've never betrayed you, never kept anything from you. He looked at her. The frost in his eyes softened, only to fade into emptiness. Never kept anything? Then what about the automated operations project in the sub-level B lab? Who authorized the after-hours activation of the robotics system? She froze. A heartbeat of silence. Then an exhale, the sound of someone realizing they'd just stepped into a trap. I was only checking the system. There was a temperature alert in the storage vault. And you didn't tell me? She shook her head, the tears coming faster. Because I knew you'd see it as weakness. I just wanted to prove I could handle it myself. And the result, he said quietly, was that I almost died. Jessica's arms fell limp at her sides, as though something vital had just drained from her body. No one dared to meet her eyes. Some guests turned away. Others lowered their heads. And from the far side of the hall, Alan simply watched, small, still, as if she were seeing a play she already knew the ending to. James stepped back, leaning on the table for support. A wave of dizziness passed through him. He grabbed the chair's edge to steady himself. Alan was the first to move. You need to stop, she said firmly. The poison's taking effect. He gave a faint nod but spoke anyway, voice heavy, deliberate. Not yet. The truth isn't finished. Mark rushed forward to help, but James brushed him off. No one moves. Call the diagnostics team. I want a full scan of the robotic control system. If Jessica's innocent, the data will clear her. If not, his breath hitched, then I won't need a court. The sentence fell like iron. Everyone felt the chill crawl up their spine. Jessica stared at him, eyes wet but filled with something new. Not despair, fear. James, she whispered, if you look, you'll regret it. He raised his head, gaze locking onto hers, slow and heavy. Jessica, I've been regretting things for a long time. A flash of lightning tore through the sky, flooding the room in a white blaze. In that split second, Alan noticed it. Something faint, something wrong. A shimmer on Jessica's wrist, a thin, glowing line, like a filament, catching the light exactly the way the strange mark had glimmered on the neck of the first poisoned bottle. Alan froze. Her heart pounded. She looked up at James, but he didn't see it. She stepped back, breath quick, her small face paling in the dim light. And then she whispered, just loud enough for herself to hear. Not Hawkins, not the machine. It's a person. The hall was drowned in cold light, its pale glow washing over exhausted faces. Outside, the rain had softened into a dark, steady rhythm, the background pulse of a story nearing its final act. James sat at the center, hands clasped, his gaze sharp and heavy, as if he could cut through silence itself to find the one lie hiding among them. Mark stood beside him, his voice firm. By order of Mr. Jones, the interrogation begins. Everyone here will answer, truthfully, or not, leave this building at all. A ripple of fear swept the room. The guests exchanged glances, part horror, part indignation, but no one dared to speak out. James leaned forward. We'll start with you, he said, eyes fixed on Jessica. Because it all began with that bottle, and with your hands. Jessica lifted her head, the tremor in her shoulders was gone. Under the white light, she seemed transformed, proud, cold, and almost resigned, like someone who had accepted her place in the corner of history. You want the truth? She asked softly. James's reply was dry as paper. No, I want the reason. I'll find the truth myself. She gave a faint, bitter smile. The reason? Because I've spent 10 years watching you turn people into numbers, faith into contracts, love into leverage. Because I'm tired of seeing an empire built on fear. Mark's expression hardened. You're admitting you tampered with the system? No, Jessica said evenly. I just wanted him to feel fear. To know that power doesn't protect anyone, not even him. James nodded once, his voice low but clear. So you chose poison? No, I only triggered the warning. The one who released the compound wasn't me. The hall fell utterly silent. James's eyes narrowed. Then who? Jessica glanced around, then stopped. Her gaze landed on Alan. The child. Every head turned. Alan didn't move. She simply looked back at Jessica, calm, almost pitying. "You're lying," Jessica scoffed. "A 6-year-old calls me a liar?" "No," Alan said quietly. "Someone who saw the truth calls you one." James's voice deepened, steady but dangerous. "Alan, if you know something, now is the time." The girl took a slow breath and stepped forward, her small shoes tapping softly on the marble. She stopped in front of the table, before James, before Jessica, before the room itself. "I didn't make the poison," she said, "but I know who created it." Mark blinked. "You know?" Alan nodded. "Because I've seen that green streak before, on my father's wrist the day he died." The room jolted, a collective inhale that felt like thunder trapped indoors. Jessica stumbled back, eyes wide. James rose from his chair. "What are you saying, Alan?" She turned to him, voice steady. "My father worked in your company's laboratory. He was accused of misconduct and suspended. But he wasn't wrong. He discovered that someone in upper management was using toxic compounds to cut costs. He tried to report it, and the lab burned." James frowned, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you believe?" Alan's eyes locked onto his. "Not you. The person sitting beside you for the last 10 years. The hall froze. Jessica's voice cracked. "She's making this up. She's trying to protect her father's name." Alan didn't blink. "Do you know how he died?" His hand bore the same glowing trace as the bottle tonight. The same compound, the same formula. And the only person authorized to use it was the lab director, you. The rain outside deepened, pounding harder, drowning out gasps and whispers. Jessica stood still, her skin pale as marble, lips parting without sound. James turned toward her. His voice came slow, each word weighted with metal. "Is it true, Jessica?" She exhaled, then laughed. A thin, broken laugh that sounded more like surrender than defiance. "You really think a child could expose me?" Alan shook her head. "Not me. My father. He never left this place." The words froze Jessica's smile. "He left data in the system," Alan continued. "When someone activated the warehouse robots." His file reopened. James's eyes flickered, the faint glint of memory returning. He looked at Mark, who immediately ran for the control panel. The hall fell silent once more. Jessica stood against the wall, the white light washing over her, making her look like a statue about to crack. Alan turned to James, her voice unwavering. "You asked who poisoned you. Now the data will answer, and it will speak with the voice of the dead." Outside, thunder exploded, splitting the night sky. Inside, every eye turned to the screens. Because in that instant, the story of power, betrayal, and truth had just begun to turn upside down. The metal door closed behind Mark with a dull thud, sealing the room in a suffocating silence. The kind of silence that felt sentient, as if the air itself were watching. James sat still, fingers interlaced, his eyes fixed on Jessica. He said nothing. He didn't need to. At his level of power, silence was interrogation. Jessica stood frozen, her face pale and rigid. She tried to look composed, but her body betrayed her. Her head tilted slightly, her hand half covered her throat, her foot edged sideways into a defensive stance. James noticed it instantly. He'd studied hundreds of behavioral reports, trained subordinates on how not to reveal weakness, and now he was watching every textbook signal of guilt unfold in front of him, line by line. "You're trembling, Jessica," he said quietly, his voice low and glacial. "But not because you're afraid of me, are you? You're afraid of something else, something that's getting closer." She shook her head, forcing a crooked smile. "You're imagining things, James. I'm not afraid." "Really?" He stood slowly, taking a step forward. "Then why is your throat dry, your eyes blinking twice as often, and your left hand still gripping your right wrist, right where that glowing mark is?" Jessica looked down. Her fingers jerked away as if burned. She backed up a step. The entire hall went silent again. Alan watched, her dark eyes catching the faint light. "She's not lying because she's scared," the girl said softly. She's lying because she has no truth left to tell. James turned his gaze back to Jessica. How long do you plan to keep that silence? Jessica closed her eyes, took a breath. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but when she looked up again, there was no weakness left, only steel. I didn't kill you, I didn't poison you, but yes, I let them into the system. I thought it was a test, one of your security trials, like the ones you used to run on us. James stiffened. Who are they? She gave a thin, bitter laugh. The ones you call partners, but they're really creditors. The Elston Group, the International Finance Council. They wanted control over your biotech data systems. They asked me to open a temporary gateway. I thought you knew. I thought it was your plan. James said nothing. The truth cut through him like a fine blade, not deep enough to kill, but sharp enough to strip the armor off his certainty. And now that I'm still alive, he murmured, they'll think you betrayed them, which means you're their next target. Jessica gave a broken laugh, her voice raw. I know. Maybe now I finally understand you, what it's like to be hunted. Thunder rolled outside, and a greenish flash flickered through the glass. Mark returned, holding a small silver drive. His face was grave. I found it. A data file dated 10 years ago, the same week as the chemical lab fire. Open it, James said. Mark connected the drive. The large screen blinked on. A single line pulsed across it. For Alan, from ML. The air went still. Alan stepped forward slowly, her eyes glowing in the dim light. ML, Marcus Lee, my father. Then a voice, old, weary, recorded years ago, filled the speakers. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't survive. Project Delta isn't just pharmaceutical research. They're testing a neurocontrol compound, one that manipulates human behavior. I kept it from James because they threatened my daughter. But if she's alive, tell him this. The one behind all of it isn't inside the company. The room froze. James stood motionless, eyes distant. Not inside the company, he repeated, the words heavy as iron. Alan turned toward Jessica, her tone calm, almost too calm. You were just a piece on the board, like my father was. They never needed someone to kill him, only someone to make him stop trusting anyone. Jessica's tears fell freely now. She sank to the floor, hands covering her head. Oh God, I did exactly what they wanted. James exhaled, his voice soft but cutting. We all did. He stepped closer to Alan. You were right. The most frightened ones tell the worst lies, and the ones who fear nothing are the most dangerous. Alan looked up at him, her voice a whisper carried by the storm. That person is listening to us right now. James froze. What do you mean? Alan raised her hand, pointing toward the security camera above. The data file just triggered the recording system. Someone's controlling it remotely, right now. Every head turned upward. The red light on the camera was blinking. Mark lunged toward the control board to cut power, but he was too late. The monitor flashed. A new line appeared on the screen. Hello, James. James staggered back, sweat breaking across his forehead. The rain outside grew louder, pounding like war drums. Inside, there was no sound, except the heavy thud of his heartbeat in his ears. And in the flickering white light, Alan whispered, This game isn't over, Mr. Jones. It's only beginning again. The red light on the camera flicked off, plunging the hall into a silence so heavy it felt alive. No one moved. On the giant screen, the final line still glowed in the darkness. Hello, James. 4 letters, and the world he'd built began to crack. Mark stepped forward, hastily pulling the cable from the console. External access confirmed, coming from a backup server in the sub-basement. I'll go check it. No, James rasped, stopping him with a glance. Everyone stays. The basement isn't just where we keep data anymore. It's where the old wounds are opening themselves. Alan stood motionless, her small eyes fixed on nothing, as if she could hear something the rest could not. He's down there, she whispered. He? James turned toward her. Who are you talking about? The one who left everything behind, she said quietly. My father didn't send that file for revenge. He wanted to prove that some people stay clean in a dirty world. And he believed one of them was you. James froze. For a moment, the frost in his face fractured. Why do you believe that, Alan? She smiled faintly. Because if you were like them, you wouldn't still be sitting here, listening. No one spoke again. Only the rain outside and the ticking of the wall clock remained, the rhythm of judgment. Mark looked down at the device in his hand. There's an auxiliary track attached to the recording, a file that hasn't been opened. It could be the final message. James nodded. Play it. The screen brightened. A grainy video appeared, an old lab feed. A brown-skinned man in a white lab coat faced the camera, Marcus Lee. His eyes were tired, kind. If you're seeing this, his voice came steady but frail. It means I didn't make it. Project Delta isn't medical research. It's an experiment in neurocontrol, chemicals designed to alter behavior. I hid the truth from James because they threatened my daughter. But if she's alive, tell him this. The one behind everything isn't inside the company. Silence. James stood still, his voice barely more than breath. Not inside. The company. Alan turned toward Jessica, her tone calm, chillingly calm. You were only a pawn, like my father. They didn't need someone to kill him, just someone to make him stop trusting anyone. Jessica's tears broke free. She dropped to her knees, hands clutching her head. Oh God, I did exactly what they wanted. James exhaled, his voice low, blade thin. So did I. He looked at Alan. You were right. The most frightened ones tell the worst lies. And the one who fears nothing, that's the one to fear. Alan met his eyes, her voice soft as rain. That person is listening to us right now. James tensed. What do you mean? She pointed to the camera above. The playback just triggered the live recording system. Someone's watching. Right now. Everyone looked up. The red indicator on the lens was blinking. Mark lunged to cut the feed. Too late. A new line flashed across the screen. Hello, James. James staggered back, sweat beading across his brow. The pounding of the rain outside grew heavier, a war drum against the glass. Inside, the only sound was his heartbeat. Then suddenly the words vanished. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, another flicker. See you in London. No one breathed. The lights cut out completely. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Alan's voice rose softly from somewhere in the dark. Steady, calm, almost prophetic. The game isn't over. They just changed the board. The darkness swallowed the hall in seconds. Panic broke through in fragments. Sharp breaths, scraping chairs, shoes sliding across the wet marble floor. Then, the emergency lights flickered on, a thin, red glow that washed everything in the color of blood. James didn't move. He wasn't panicking, but in that light, his face no longer looked like the man who commanded empires. It looked like someone finally realizing he'd been playing inside someone else's game all along. Mark bent over the console, sweat streaking down his temple. The system's fully compromised, sir. Power down command didn't originate inside the building. Jessica's voice trembled, barely a whisper. London, he's really in London? James turned, slow and calm. No. If he sent that message, it means he's watching. And if he's watching, it means he's close. Alan's black eyes gleamed faintly in the red haze. He never left the country. London is a diversion. James looked at her, a small nod, almost proud. Smart. Then to Mark. Check the global comm logs. I want to know where that signal came from. Mark typed rapidly, the board flashing crimson. No access. Dual encryption lockout. It'll take someone who built the system. That would be me. James stepped forward, pressed his palm to the scanner. A soft blue glow swept across his face. Code cascaded across the display, then stopped. Connection. Active. Source. Internal. Mark froze. The signal's coming from inside the building? Silence dropped like a stone. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Alan whispered. That means someone's still here. James nodded once. He never left. Mark drew his gun, eyes razor tight. I'll sweep every floor. No, James said, his voice hard, metallic. He wants us divided. I won't follow his script. Jessica's voice shook. You said he wants us divided. You think he's watching us right now? Not just watching, Alan answered, steady and soft. He's listening, recording every reaction. The room seemed to freeze solid. Every breath became a confession. James walked to the central console, picked up the intercom mic, and pressed the button. His voice came out calm, too calm. Alexander, if you're listening, let's skip the theatrics. I know you're in the network. And I know this isn't about killing me. You want me broken, the same way you broke my father. A faint hiss from the speakers, then a voice, distorted by static, rich and cruelly familiar. Ah, James, finally the right question. I never needed to kill you. I only needed you to destroy yourself, with trust. Jessica gasped, clutching the edge of the chair. He's here. He's really here. James's reply was measured, controlled. Alexander, if you're as brilliant as you think, face me. No more ghosts. A laugh, fractured, echoing through every speaker at once, filled the hall. Face you, James? I have been facing you. Since the beginning of the gala. Mark froze. Since the beginning? James's gaze swept across the room, guest to guest, face to face, until it stopped at the far end. A man in a crisp white shirt and black tie stood at the back of the servant line. Expression calm. Smile razor thin. Alan's whisper cut through the air. He never blinks. James took a step forward. Your name? The man tilted his head slightly, his smile widening. Name? In this room, everyone wears more than one, Mr. Jones. Mark raised his weapon. Put the tray down. The man obeyed, gently setting the silver tray on the table, soundless, then straightened. His voice was deep, warm, and unnervingly steady. You really think I need to be in London to control a network? All I need is one small device, and one broken promise. James's tone dropped to a growl. Alexander Cole. The man smiled, removing his glasses. I like the way you say my name. Precise. Just like your father used to. Jessica stumbled backward, horror twisting her face. All this time, you were here? Alexander didn't deny it. He stepped forward, just enough for the red light to catch in his eyes. You thought you could rebuild the world, James. You forgot. Those who invent the game don't play by its rules. James clenched his fists. Then, tonight, we change the rules. Alexander glanced at Alan, amused. And the child, sharp little thing, almost makes me feel guilty. Alan didn't flinch. You'll never win, because you don't know who's watching you. Alexander's smile twitched. What do you mean, little one? I just reactivated the camera system. For one sharp second, blinding light. The blue glow of 16 cameras flickered alive around the hall, every angle capturing Alexander's face. His image multiplied across the giant screens. No escape, no shadows left. Mark shouted, Sending feed to security command now. Alexander didn't move. He only laughed softly, almost kindly. Clever girl. But you should know, the moment you start recording. The game always moves to the next level. A single, crisp click. Then, every screen went black. Alan exhaled slowly, her small hand still resting on the console. She whispered, barely audible to James. He's not afraid of being seen. He wants us to see, because what comes after is worse. James's voice dropped. After? Alan looked up, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, where a single red dot had just appeared. Silent, precise. Not a camera this time. A laser. A short beep echoed. Then a laser beam swept across the ceiling, cutting a thin red line through the misted reflection of rain outside the glass walls. The entire hall froze. Mark dropped low, shouting, Everyone down! It's a proximity-triggered detonation system. Screams erupted, chairs crashed, glasses shattered, shoes scraped across marble. Only Alan didn't move, her eyes locked on the moving red dot as it traced a slow rhythm. "Not a bomb," she whispered to James. "A sensor." Alexander's laugh filled the hall through the speakers. "Smart girl, but not just a sensor, a boundary. If anyone leaves this room, security will arrive. Not to rescue, but to clean up." James's voice cut through the noise, low and sharp. "What do you want, Alexander?" "Nothing," came the calm reply. "I just want you to look at your empire. One last time." 4 ceiling screens lit up at once, playing footage thought erased. Hawkins being coerced into swapping the wine. Jessica is under hidden surveillance. Staff forced to sign falsified reports. And James, signing away data control to an anonymous partner. Alexander. The hall fell silent. Dozens of terrified eyes turned toward James. Alexander's laughter crackled through the speakers. "You see now, no one's innocent. I owed all of you the moment you signed that deal, James. I just waited for you to destroy yourself. But the girl, she ruined my game." Alan looked up, calm as ever. "Because you forgot one thing. Every game has an observer." Alexander tilted his head. "And who exactly are you, little one?" "Someone my father taught to see liars." That single line stopped him, just for a second. But 1 second was enough. Mark lunged forward, shoving James aside, tackling Alexander to the ground. The 2 men crashed hard onto the marble floor. A silver tray clattered away. Something small rolled free from Alexander's jacket, a black device, its red light blinking. Alan shouted, "Cut the signal now. That's the control hub." James grabbed the mic. "Shut down all first-floor systems. Switch to manual override." Mark wrestled with Alexander, who fought like a cornered animal. "You don't understand, James," he snarled. "I don't need to kill you. I just need you to live in fear." "What you call fear," James growled, "is just your own reflection." Mark landed a punch that sent Alexander sprawling. Jessica ran over, ripping a tablecloth and tying his hands. Heavy breathing filled the air, mingling with the hum of dying circuits and the rain's hiss outside. Alexander laughed, blood at the corner of his mouth. "You think tying me up means you've won? This network runs itself now. You can lock me up, but you can't stop the process." James grabbed his collar. "What process?" "Erasing every Delta file, every trace linking me to it. 5 minutes, and it's all gone. And you—" he smirked. "You'll be the only one left to blame." James's anger stilled, replaced by quiet certainty. "No, Alexander, you forgot something." "What?" James looked toward Alan. "This time, I'm not fighting alone." Alan stepped forward, placing her small hand over the black device. "You can lock me up if I'm wrong," she said softly. "I trust you," James replied. She closed her eyes. 10 seconds of silence. Everyone held their breath. Then, she turned the dial counterclockwise. The red light went dark. Total silence. Mark blinked. "What did you just do?" Alan opened her eyes. "Reverse the circuit. My father once said, every system has an exit gate in case of failure." He didn't erase Delta. He moved it. Alexander's face twisted in disbelief. "Impossible. No one knows that code but me." "My father did," Alan said. "He rewrote the command, hid it in Delta's core, and tagged your name. So when you accessed it, the system recorded every action you took." Mark looked up at the screen. Lines of code flashed across. "Backup file. Delta restored. Sending to global server." Jessica covered her mouth, tears spilling. "Oh my God! It's sending!" James stared at Alexander, calm, almost sorrowful. "And that's how the game ends." Alexander laughed weakly. "You win, James. But out there, the world doesn't care who's right. They'll see a billionaire brought down by his own team. You'll live, but in disgrace." James met his eyes. "No, I'll live in truth." He turned to Mark. "Call the police. He's theirs now." Mark nodded, tapping his encrypted line. Alexander's voice darkened. You think it's over? Delta isn't a project. It's a seed. And when it grows somewhere else, you'll face it again, wearing a different face. Alan stepped forward, steady as stone. No. Because this time, we'll be the ones watching. Police lights burst through the rain-streaked windows, red and blue flooding the hall. Officers stormed in, cuffing Alexander. As they dragged him away, he turned his head, eyes locked on James. I told you, the game never ends. See you in the next round. When the door shut, only the sound of rain remained. James sank into a chair, his hand trembling slightly. Jessica placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You did it. He shook his head. No, Jessica, she did. Alan stood silently, staring toward the closed door. His game isn't over. But next time, we won't wait to be attacked. James nodded slowly, his gaze drifting toward the glass wall where dawn was breaking. Next time, we write the rules. The first light of morning pierced the rain, falling over 3 figures. A child, a woman, and a man. Survivors of a night when power collapsed. They hadn't won because they were stronger. They'd won because they dared to look straight into the dark. Dawn spread over the city through a thin layer of mist. Pale light shimmered against rain-streaked glass. The grand hall was silent now, heavy, motionless. Yet the aftermath of chaos still lingered. Broken glass, crumpled linens, a smear of dried blood across the marble floor. But James didn't look at any of it. He looked outward, toward the sky, turning faint blue eyes distant, chasing a thought he hadn't yet named. Mark approached, voice hoarse with exhaustion. The police have taken Alexander. They said he'll be transferred to a federal high-security facility. Delta's fully restored, and the backup data has been sent to a protected server. James nodded slightly but said nothing. His fingers tapped slow rhythms against the table. Alan stood by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon. The rain's almost over, she murmured. James turned to her. You're not afraid? She shook her head. No, I just think, when the rain stops, people tend to forget how big the storm was. The line drew a faint smile from him, one that never reached his eyes. He looked at Mark. Run a full audit again. I want to know who was the last to touch the Delta files. Mark opened his tablet, typed several commands, then frowned. Sir, there was a secondary access after the system rebooted. Most traces were wiped, but the login ID reads, Jessica. The air grew colder. James lifted his head slowly. What did you say? ID, Jessica, row. Access time 5:23 a.m., after the police arrived. Alan turned sharply, eyes wide. That's impossible. She was right here. Maybe, Mark said, but it came from her credentials. Either it was her, or someone used her identity. James leaned back, silent for a moment. Jessica isn't foolish enough to leave a trail. So either someone's framing her, or she hasn't told us everything. Silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked louder than before. Alan spoke first, calm and clear. Maybe she didn't betray you. Maybe she's just hiding part of the truth. James turned toward her, gaze steady. And what truth would that be? Alan didn't move her eyes from the window. Someone who doesn't betray yet still feels guilty, only hides something when they're protecting someone. Mark interjected. Protecting who? Alan lifted her chin. Maybe her father, or the person who brought her into the company in the first place. James rose slowly. She once said she was introduced by an old friend of my father's, and she never gave a name. Mark frowned. You think that person is? James stared toward the faint light on the horizon. If Alexander were only a middleman, then that person is the real player. Alan turned, her expression unusually grave. The one Jessica's protecting is the next move. A soft breeze slipped through the half-open window, stirring the thin curtain. The sky outside was still gray, yet the first sunlight broke through. James looked at Alan, a quiet resolve returning to his face. Not relief, but the awareness of a new path opening. One that led straight into another abyss. Mark, he said, Keep eyes on Jessica. Quietly. No action yet. Mark nodded. You think she'll make a move? No, James replied. I think she'll meet someone. Alan spoke softly, like wind against glass. She'll go to the one even you haven't dared to name. James studied her, surprise and respect flickering together. You're right. Every game has a hand behind it. And the real winner is always the one we never see. Outside, sunlight streamed through the glass, glinting off the dried blood on the floor. A reminder, and a warning. James's voice dropped, low and cold. The board has shifted, and Jessica just made the first move. Alan's gaze followed his, her dark eyes narrowing as dawn filled the room. If she's truly back in the game, she said quietly, then this time, she isn't playing for you. Night fell, and the city came alive with light. The towers along the river blazed like shattered mirrors spilling across the water. On the top floor of the Crown Meridian Hotel, a man sat alone at a private bar, swirling his glass beneath the amber glow. His face was intelligent, his smile cultured, the kind of smile that commanded rooms without ever needing to raise its voice. Vance Harrington, senior strategic advisor at Jones Holdings, and the man Jessica had agreed to meet less than an hour ago. She entered in a long coat, traces of exhaustion still shadowing her face. Vance rose, smiling faintly. You're 3 minutes late. For a moment, I thought you'd lost the courage to see me again. Why would I be afraid? She replied, calm, steady. He poured her a drink, movements smooth and practiced. Because when a pawn survives the fall of its king, the wise thing to do is leave the board. Jessica met his gaze. I was never a pawn. I just didn't know who the real player was. Vance's smile sharpened like a blade. I told you that answer 10 years ago, during your first interview with Jones Holdings. Remember what I asked? Would you rather work for the leader or the one who controls the leader? You said, the one who controls. I liked that answer, Jessica. Her breath caught slightly. So it was you. You're the one who brought me into the company, not Alexander, not his father. Smarter than I gave you credit for, he said, swirling his glass. The red liquid glinted like blood. Alexander was a decoy, a distraction I raised to mislead James. I'm the one who holds the key. Delta was only a prototype. The real asset is the algorithm, the one that controls belief. When a man believes in the wrong person, he destroys himself. And James did exactly that. Jessica's grip tightened on her glass. He trusted me, to the very end. Vance tilted his head, almost gentle. That's why he failed. Silence thickened between them. The light flickered over Jessica's face, bright, then shadowed, as if dividing her in two. I used to think he deserved punishment, she said slowly. But now I see, the most dangerous person isn't the one who's wrong, it's the one convinced they're always right. Vance's smile faded. Are you talking about me? No. She stood, voice calm. I'm talking about people who think they can rewrite the world through fear. He leaned forward, voice low, threatening. You think you can walk away? James may have spared you, but I won't. I don't leave variables alive to ruin the equation. Jessica looked him straight in the eyes. You're right. But there's one thing you forgot. She set a small device on the table, a data drive. This is a full backup of Delta, including your recorded conversation with Alexander. Recovered from a secondary server. I sent the original to James this morning. The smile vanished from Vance's face. He stood abruptly, voice hard as steel. You just signed your own death warrant. Maybe, Jessica said, her hand trembling slightly, eyes steady. But at least I chose the right side. He stepped closer, voice cutting like glass. You think James will ever trust you again? He'll doubt you, question you, and in the end, he'll eliminate you. That's how men like him survive. Jessica's lips curved faintly. Maybe. But this time, the truth won't come from me. Just then, a phone rang in Vance's pocket. He glanced at the screen. The caller ID read, J. Jones. he answered slowly, eyes never leaving Jessica. James, he said with a mocking tone, I'm speaking with the woman you almost killed last night. A pause. Then James's voice came through, calm, resonant, unwavering. I know. And I know exactly where you are, Vance. Vance frowned. You can't possibly... I'm looking at you. He turned sharply toward the window. Across the street, a faint green light swept across the glass, the lens of a long-range camera. James's voice continued, cold and composed. She didn't come alone, Vance. I let her go to see who would meet her first. And as always, you didn't disappoint. Vance clenched his phone. You think you can catch me that easily? I'm not catching you, James said. I'm showing the world who you really are. A faint beep sounded from Vance's phone. He looked down. The recording light was flashing. The entire conversation had just been broadcast to Jones Holdings' internal communication network. Jessica took a step back, her voice calm and final. The game's over, Vance. He stared at her, part fury, part disbelief. No, your game is over. Mine has just begun. He pulled out a second microchip, smaller than a fingernail, holding it up before crushing his phone in his hand. The original data isn't on the system. It's somewhere you'll never reach. He backed toward the shadowed hallway. Jessica made a move to follow, but James's voice came through her earpiece. Don't. He wants to be chased. Outside, a dark helicopter rose from the opposite rooftop, its blades scattering mist and neon light across the bar ceiling. Vance turned back one last time, smiled faintly at Jessica, and mouthed 3 silent words. See you soon. The glass door opened, and he vanished into the night, leaving behind only the scent of whiskey and the fading thrum of rotor blades. Jessica stood still, gripping her glass tightly. Her voice, soft as wind, broke the silence. If he's the one who controls the game, then next time, we'll be the ones who write the rules. Outside, the night sky shimmered with a faint silver hue. The first trace of a new war waiting to begin. The eastern sky turned silver-gray just as Vance's black helicopter cut across the edge of the financial district. He sat motionless, eyes cold, fingers turning the tiny memory chip like a hidden weapon. Below, the city stirred awake, but in his mind, the game was far from over. On the 60th floor of Jones Holdings, James stood before a wall of surveillance screens. Dozens of tracking signals blinked in sync, locking on to the helicopter's heat signature. Beside him, Alan's small face reflected the flicker of data. He won't get far, she said quietly. That aircraft uses an old navigation build. It's still tied to the Delta network. James nodded. His voice was calm, steady steel. Good. Activate Protocol Omega. Mark's head snapped up. Sir, Omega is a national-level emergency code. It's only for when the traitor hides inside the national grid, James cut in, eyes fixed on the screen. And now, we have proof. The central monitor flared. Delta rebooted. Streams of encrypted data cascaded open, revealing the helicopter's route and the pulse frequency from the device in Vance's pocket. The very chip he believed was offline. Alan whispered. He doesn't know. My father rewrote the mirror layer of that code. Anyone using the original data broadcasts their biometric trace. Jessica, stepping into the control room, added softly, He's exposing himself. James gave a single nod. Patch me through to air traffic control. A voice crackled through the comms. Helicopter XA 403 heading northeast, speed decreasing. Your command, sir? James glanced at Alan, then back to the screen. Transmit Omega authorization. Force landing. 10 minutes later, the live feed showed the aircraft wobbling mid-air, controls freezing as the automatic override engaged. Moments after, it descended, circling down toward a restricted military airfield. When the door opened, Vance stepped out, calm, smiling faintly, as sirens wailed and Special Forces vehicles closed in. He raised his hands, defiant even in defeat. You can chain my hands, he said. But you can't chain what I've planted. James arrived hours later, beneath the sharp glare of the new morning. He faced the man who had once been his ally, now an enemy made of intellect and betrayal. "Vance Harrington," James said evenly. "You're under arrest for treason, national data manipulation, and attempted murder." Vance's smile curved again, not cruel, but disturbingly calm. "Treason? No, James. I'm saving humanity from the illusion of freedom you keep selling. Your empire didn't fall because of me. It fell because you still believe in justice." James met his gaze. His anger had cooled to quiet resolve. "Justice may be slow, but it doesn't forget." Vance lowered his head, voice like smoke. "You're wrong. It always forgets, when the one writing the law is the one holding power." Alan stepped forward, sunlight glinting in her dark eyes. "Not this time," she said clearly. "Because this time, we're the ones rewriting the law." Vance studied her for a long moment, then smiled, almost admiringly. "Marcus Lee's daughter? Seems the world still knows how to make challengers." The officers led him away. James watched, his voice a quiet reflection. Challenge isn't the danger. The danger comes when people stop daring to. Alan looked upward, to where the helicopter's vapor trail faded into pale sky. "The board is cleared," she murmured, "but a new game is already setting up." James smiled faintly, eyes catching the morning light. "You're right. And this time, you'll be the one making the first move." The sun rose fully over the skyline, glinting off the glass of the Jones Tower. A city reborn from stormlight, a silence that carried promise. 3 words lingered between them, unspoken yet certain. The game continues, but now, it's theirs. After the storm, the city looked as if it had been washed clean in a film of silver mist. The first morning, light streamed through tall buildings, reflecting off rain-slicked streets. Traffic returned, but slower, quieter, like a city exhaling after holding its breath all night. On the 60th floor of Jones Holdings, the former center of chaos, everything was unusually still. No alarms, no smoke, only soft daylight resting on white walls and the glass window overlooking the river. The room that had witnessed fear, betrayal, and blood now looked untouched, almost innocent. But those who remained knew better. None of them was the same. James stood by the window, holding a cup of hot tea. Steam rose slowly, curling like smoke from memory. Behind him, Alan sat at the table, writing in a worn brown notebook. Each time she looked up, her eyes carried a rare kind of clarity, bright, but no longer innocent. "What are you thinking?" the girl asked without looking up. James set his cup down and gazed outside. "That I once believed control was power, but really, control is fear, carefully disguised." Alan paused, then looked at him. "Fear of what?" "That if I don't control others, they'll hurt me first." She nodded softly. "Like Vance." James turned toward her, eyes deep and calm. "No, Vance wasn't afraid of being hurt. He was afraid of being forgotten, and that is far more dangerous." Silence filled the room. Alan closed her notebook and stepped beside him. "Do you regret it?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, but not for what I lost, only for how long it took me to realize I could still start again." The door opened. Jessica entered in a white shirt, hair tied neatly back. No makeup, no perfume, just fatigue and honesty. "The police have transferred all Delta data to the Security Bureau," she said quietly. "Everything's verified. Vance will be prosecuted. But—" James turned. "But what?" "There's a hidden account still active," she said hesitantly. "It's sending small packets of data out, very slow, almost invisible. The destination is London." No one spoke. The words fell like a single raindrop into a deep river, rippling outward. Mark entered carrying his laptop. "I checked. The files aren't classified, just recordings, images, and internal messages. But in the wrong hands, they could rewrite the story. They could turn us into criminals." James straightened, his tone calm and deliberate. "Then we won't let them write history." He looked at Alan. "Remember Vance's rule? He said he didn't need to kill me, just make me doubt everyone. Now we'll do the opposite." Alan understood immediately. "You'll make everything public." James nodded. No more hiding. If light is the only thing that makes darkness retreat, then we open every door. Jessica's voice trembled. You know the cost, don't you? Once everything's out, your reputation collapses. The company could lose half its value in a week. James looked at her, gentle but firm. Sometimes to keep your soul, you have to lose your throne. The room went still. Mark bowed his head slightly in respect. I'll arrange the press conference. Alan stepped forward. If they ask, what should I say? James smiled, resting a hand on her shoulder. Tell them no child should have to learn how to spot lies at 6 years old. Tell them the world only becomes safe when it listens, to the ones no one listens to. Alan nodded slowly. I understand. Outside, the clouds were breaking. Sunlight spilled across the table, onto Alan's open notebook. On the fresh page, one line was written in careful letters. Every empire built on fear will one day fall by a single act of kindness. Jessica read the line softly. Marcus Lee was right. A man can die, but belief doesn't. James nodded, eyes distant, voice low and warm, like the final breath after a storm. And this time, we won't use belief to control people. We'll use it to heal them. Outside, church bells rang slowly, echoing across the river. A new chapter was beginning. No blood, no masks of power, only 3 people, and a quiet promise. They would never let history repeat itself. 3 months later, on the morning news, the Jones Holdings logo appeared again. Not in scandal or accusation, but in a story that left the financial world silent. The corporation had officially changed its name to Phoenix Dynamics. The old silver pyramid was gone, replaced by a small sprout rising from ashes. Below it, a single line read, Born from Truth. The headquarters had been transformed. The once cold conference room now displayed paintings by employees, photos of them working, laughing, and arranging flowers in the hallway. No more mirrors of power. Only faces of real people. Inside the new office, James sat at the table. No tailored suit this time, just a plain shirt and a calm presence. In his hand was a document he had written himself. The Full Transparency Protocol. Jessica walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of him and said gently, 28 days without a single internal complaint. And every independent team has agreed to monitor the full process. James nodded, his tone warm, grounded. No one here is called subordinate anymore. Everyone has the right to ask, and the right not to fear asking. Jessica smiled faintly. Hearing you say that, I can't believe you're the same man who once made the entire market tremble. The man you're talking about is gone, he replied softly, half smiling. Buried with Vance and with Delta. Silence lingered. Then James looked out the window, where green plants now covered the terrace. I never thought I could begin again after all these years, he said quietly. But Alan showed me something. Jessica tilted her head. What's that? That to be reborn. Sometimes you don't have to win. You just have to stop pretending you're innocent. The door opened. Alan stepped in, holding a thick folder. She now wore a new white shirt embroidered with the Phoenix logo. Her eyes were still bright, but lighter, freer. Sir, she said, placing the folder on the table. I've completed the proposal for the Corporate Ethics Training Program. Over 1,200 participants have registered for the first course. James looked at her with quiet pride. And what do you want to call it? Alan smiled. The Marcus Project. The room fell still. Jessica reached out, touching the folder softly, eyes glimmering. James lowered his head, his voice barely above a whisper. Your father would be proud. Alan nodded. I just want people to remember. Honesty can save lives. And no one should have to pay the price for it alone. They sat together, watching the plan unfold on the big screen. New courses, social investment funds, and a sponsorship program for children learning critical thinking. All under one name, the Phoenix Foundation, directed by Alan Lee. Mark entered, holding the latest financial report. Sir, the stock is climbing again. The press is calling it the morality recovery phenomenon. For the first time in months, James laughed. A real laugh, free of exhaustion. Good. If morality can rise on the stock market, then maybe this world still has hope. Jessica looked at him, her voice lighter. You're not afraid of being attacked again? James turned toward her, his eyes calm, luminous. If it happens, the next generation is ready. He glanced at Alan. She smiled, raised her glass of water like a quiet vow. Not to seek revenge, but to guard the truth. James touched his cup to hers, and to make sure no one grows up in fear. Afternoon light streamed through the glass, spilling across their faces and the table. Outside, the Phoenix Dynamics sign glowed gold in the sun. A silent oath of a new empire, one not built on power, but on trust refined by fire. On the screen behind them, a new line appeared beneath the foundation's seal. We don't rebuild empires, we rebuild people. James read it silently, his eyes soft, his voice low, like the echo of an old promise. This time, we don't begin again to win. We begin again to deserve it. They say power corrupts. But no one tells you that losing power can make you finally see who you really are. James Jones once believed he was untouchable. He had money, he had people. He had an entire system built to bend the truth just to protect his name. But on that rainy night, a 6-year-old girl, with no title, no rank, no armor, did what an empire could not. She spoke the truth that everyone else was too afraid to say. Alan didn't need power to be heard. She only needed courage not to stay silent. And the silence she refused to keep saved a life. From that day on, Jones Holdings ceased to exist. Phoenix Dynamics was born, not as a company but as an apology, a reminder that every tower of power, no matter how high, needs a foundation made of honesty. Jessica chose to stay, not for fame, but because she knew. Second chances aren't for the perfect, but for those who face their mistakes. Mark remained there, quietly guarding the door, making sure the darkness never returned. And Alan. She still wore her old canvas shoes, still liked to sit and write in the brightest corner of the building, where the morning light always arrived first. Once, a journalist asked James, "What changed you the most?" He stayed silent, then looked out the window, where Alan was laughing with other children. "Maybe," he said, learning when not to speak. The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs someone brave enough not to look away. At a youth seminar months later, Alan was invited to speak. She spoke slowly, each word landing like the beat of a drum. Adults taught me that success means controlling others. But my father taught me something else. If you want to go far, listen to those who have nothing to lose. Because they're the only ones who tell the truth. The room went completely still, and in the back corner, James smiled. In a world where words can be bought, where reputations can be built, and where truth can be programmed, maybe the bravest thing isn't standing up, but standing still. To observe, to wait, and to choose the one moment when a small act can change everything. Because in the end, no one is truly innocent, but some still choose to be kind. This story isn't just about a billionaire, or a child, or an empire that fell and rose again. It's about all of us, those who've been misunderstood, afraid, or silent when they should have spoken. If you've listened this far, ask yourself, in a world full of noise, will you be the loudest voice, or the truest one? Alan's voice echoes, soft but steady. Don't wait until you have power to tell the truth, because by then, you might have already lost yourself. The image shifts to a sunset on the rooftop of Phoenix Dynamics. James stands beside Alan, both watching the crimson horizon. You know, he says quietly, some empires fall because of greed, but others fall, just to teach us how to rebuild with trust. Alan smiles, her hair catching the wind. And this time, we're not building with steel. No, he replies gently. We're building with people. Music swells, piano and cello intertwining in slow harmony. The narrator's final words land like a whisper of light. if you believe the truth is still worth fighting for, even when you stand alone. Share this story, because every share is a testimony. And sometimes, the world doesn't change through gunfire, but through a single courageous glance, like the eyes of a 6-year-old girl who chose not to bow her head. If you're still here, pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and remember a time when you saw something wrong and said nothing. We've all had that moment, the moment when the heart wanted to speak, but the mind whispered, "It's not my place." This story doesn't ask you to be perfect. It only asks you to notice, to let your heart tremble. When you see someone being hurt, if someone has ever looked down on you, dismissed your worth, remember Alan, a 6-year-old girl with no title, no status, just eyes that met the truth, and a heart that knew right from wrong. She didn't shout. She didn't fight back. She didn't walk away. She simply said 3 words. That changed an entire night. Don't do that. Sometimes, changing the world doesn't take a roar. It takes a quiet voice, but one that is honest, if you believe that. Leave a comment right now, just 2 words. Human dignity. Because every comment is a promise. Every share is a bridge between those who still believe kindness matters. And everyone who retells this story keeps the fire of faith alive. Tell me where you're watching from. From New York, Lagos, Manila, Hanoi, or a small place only you know by name. Because truth belongs to no nation, no color, no class. It belongs to those brave enough to keep it alive. If you've ever been underestimated, told you were no one, let this story remind you, you don't have to be great to make change. You just have to refuse, to look away when something's wrong. James once said, "My empire fell, but its soul survived," because one child had the courage to say no. Be that person, the one who doesn't need power to do what's right, the one who believes truth, no matter how small. It is still strong enough to pierce the dark. If you feel that truth, hit subscribe so stories like this can keep being told. Tap like if you believe courage still exists. And share this video with someone you care about, because maybe they need to hear this today. The voice softens, almost a whisper. Not everyone is born to be powerful, but everyone can choose to be kind. And sometimes, that is the highest form of strength. A beat of silence. Then the gentle piano begins to play, blending with Alan's voice, clear, steady, rising like a quiet call across the world. Don't just watch, witness. Don't just hear, feel. And when truth knocks on your door, don't turn away. The screen fades to black. Words appear slowly, one line at a time. If you believe in human dignity, share this story. Because the smallest act of courage can change everything.